You are walking every single day, you are doing what your doctor told you to do, and your blood pressure is still high. If that sounds familiar, this video is going to explain exactly why and what to change before you decide to add more steps or longer walks to your routine. Walking is one of the best things you can do for cardiovascular health, but blood pressure is not just a product of how much you move. There is a specific reason why daily walking alone is not enough for many people, and it has nothing to do with effort or dedication. You are not doing it wrong. You are missing a piece of the picture entirely. Stay with me because what you are about to hear changes the approach completely. Here is the core problem. You are walking at the same pace, for the same duration, on the same route, every single day, and your cardiovascular system has completely adapted to it. What felt like a genuine cardiovascular challenge 6 weeks ago is now routine maintenance for your body. Your heart rate barely climbs. Your blood vessels get no meaningful stimulus to dilate and remodel. And here is the part that most people never hear from anyone advising them on blood pressure. Exercise that your body has fully adapted to stops producing the blood pressure lowering effect. The adaptation that makes you fitter is the same adaptation that makes your current walk clinically insufficient for ongoing blood pressure reduction. The mechanism behind this is called the anti-hypertensive effect of exercise, and it is dose and intensity dependent in ways that steady-state low-intensity walking does not reliably sustain over the long term. When you first begin a walking program, your body responds by reducing vascular resistance, lowering resting heart rate, improving endothelial function, and producing a measurable post-exercise drop in blood pressure called post-exercise hypotension. That drop can last for up to 12 hours after a single session. But as fitness improves and the walk becomes easier, those acute responses diminish. The cardiovascular system needs progressive challenge, not just repetition. A study published in the Journal of Hypertension found that the blood pressure lowering effect of aerobic exercise was significantly greater in programs that incorporated intensity variation compared to programs using steady-state moderate intensity walking alone, even when total exercise volume was matched. The body responds to challenge, not familiarity. And right now, your daily walk has become deeply familiar. There is a second problem running alongside the adaptation issue, and this one surprises most people. If your daily walk is long enough to be mildly stressful but not intense enough to produce the full cardiovascular training effect, you may actually be triggering a low-grade cortisol response that works against your blood pressure goals. Cortisol raises blood pressure by causing the kidneys to retain sodium, constricting blood vessels, and activating the sympathetic nervous system. A walk that leaves you mildly fatigued and stressed rather than genuinely cardiovascularly challenged occupies a difficult middle zone. It is not easy enough to be purely restorative and not challenging enough to produce the vascular adaptations you need. Research published in the American Journal of Hypertension found that chronically elevated cortisol was independently associated with treatment-resistant hypertension in adults performing regular but insufficiently varied physical activity. More of the same walk is not the answer. A smarter walk is. And here is the part that makes this genuinely frustrating. Because walking is universally praised as heart-healthy, most people managing high blood pressure assume that doing more of it will eventually work. So they add 5 minutes here, another 10 there, and their blood pressure stubbornly refuses to move. They're applying more of the wrong solution rather than identifying what is actually missing. What is missing is not effort. It is a combination of 3 specific factors, each with independent research showing it moves blood pressure in ways that steady-state walking alone cannot. Before we get into what those 3 factors are, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and how long you have been managing high blood pressure. If this is already making sense of something you have been frustrated about for a long time, subscribe to Cardivive and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. If this is helping you, type 1 in the comments or 0 if it doesn't. Most people managing blood pressure through exercise focus entirely on the walk itself. The duration, the distance, the route. What almost nobody focuses on is what happens in the 23 hours that are not the walk. And this is where the real blood pressure story lives for a significant portion of people who are walking consistently but not seeing results. 3 specific factors in your non-walking hours are almost certainly working against the cardiovascular benefit of your daily exercise. And addressing even one of them tends to produce more measurable movement on the blood pressure reading than adding 30 more minutes of walking would. The first factor is mineral depletion. Regular aerobic exercise increases the excretion of both magnesium and potassium through sweat and urine, and both play direct roles in blood pressure regulation. Magnesium relaxes the smooth muscle in arterial walls. When deficient, those muscles stay in a more contracted state and blood pressure rises. Potassium counteracts the blood pressure-raising effect of sodium by signaling the kidneys to excrete more of it. A study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that magnesium supplementation produced significant reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, with the strongest effects in people deficient at baseline. People who exercise regularly are among those most likely to be mildly deficient, not because they eat poorly, but because their activity level depletes minerals faster than a sedentary diet is designed to replace. Your daily walk may be quietly draining 2 minerals. Your blood pressure depends on most. The second factor is sleep quality, and the research connecting poor sleep to treatment-resistant hypertension is some of the most consistent in cardiovascular medicine. During deep sleep, blood pressure naturally drops by 10 to 20% in a process called nocturnal dipping. This drop is an active cardiovascular recovery process that your heart and blood vessels depend on. Adults who do not dip, a pattern strongly associated with poor sleep quality and sleep apnea, have significantly higher cardiovascular risk independent of their daytime blood pressure readings. A study in the Journal of Hypertension found that non-dippers had nearly double the rate of cardiovascular events compared to dippers, even when their average daytime blood pressure was similar. If you are walking every day but sleeping poorly, the walk is delivering a benefit that poor sleep is partially erasing. You cannot outwalk a disrupted recovery process. The third factor is chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, and this one feels invisible, which is why most people dismiss it. Heart rate variability measures the variation between heartbeats and is one of the most sensitive indicators of how recovered your nervous system is. Low heart rate variability is independently associated with higher blood pressure and cardiovascular risk. Walking improves it over time, but chronic stress, poor sleep, or excessive caffeine can suppress it faster than a daily walk can build it. A study in psychosomatic medicine found that adults with chronically low heart rate variability showed significantly blunted blood pressure reductions in response to aerobic exercise compared to those with healthy variability. Your nervous system state is either amplifying or erasing the benefit of your walk. Here is something worth knowing before we continue. The protocol we are building only reaches its full potential when your nutrition is working alongside it. The foods you eat every day are either supporting your blood vessel function and blood pressure response or quietly undermining both. That is why I put together a complete heart health nutrition guide in my Etsy shop. It covers the specific foods shown to lower blood pressure, the dietary patterns that support vascular health, and the common foods most people think are heart healthy, but the research says otherwise. The link is in the description. This is where the picture becomes genuinely actionable, because everything we have covered so far points to the same conclusion. Walking is necessary but not sufficient. The missing pieces are mostly nutritional and behavioral, and the nutritional side has specific research-backed answers that most people managing blood pressure through exercise have never been given. What you eat in the hours around your walk either compounds the cardiovascular benefit of your exercise or blunts it. Here are the specific food categories the research supports for people who are already walking and still seeing high blood pressure readings. The first food category is nitrate-rich vegetables, and this one directly addresses the endothelial function piece of the blood pressure puzzle. Beetroot, spinach, arugula, and celery are all high in dietary nitrates that the body converts to nitric oxide, the molecule that signals arterial walls to relax and dilate. When you walk, your muscles produce nitric oxide as part of the vasodilatory response that makes exercise cardiovascularly beneficial. Eating nitrate-rich foods in the hours before or after your walk gives your body more of the raw material for that response. A study in the journal Hypertension found that daily beetroot juice consumption reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 millimeters of mercury over 4 weeks in adults with high blood pressure. That is a clinically meaningful reduction on its own. And the effect is additive with exercise, meaning nitrate-rich foods and walking together produce a greater blood pressure response than either produces alone. The second food category is potassium-rich whole foods, and this directly addresses the mineral depletion problem. Avocados, sweet potatoes, white beans, bananas, and spinach are among the richest dietary sources of potassium. And increasing potassium intake is one of the most consistently effective dietary interventions for blood pressure in people who exercise regularly. A study in the British Medical Journal found that higher dietary potassium intake was independently associated with lower blood pressure and reduced stroke risk, independent of sodium intake. The potassium to sodium ratio in your diet matters far more than sodium restriction alone. Most people trying to manage blood pressure cut salt while consuming very little potassium, which is the half measure that explains why sodium restriction so often produces disappointing results. If you are walking daily and sweating out potassium, replacing it through food is not optional. It is essential. The third food category is omega-3 rich foods, and when you eat them relative to your walk matters. Fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, as well as walnuts and flaxseed, reduce the inflammatory signaling in blood vessel walls that contributes to elevated vascular resistance. A meta-analysis in the Journal of Hypertension found that omega-3 intake was associated with significant reductions in both systolic and diastolic pressure, with effects strongest in people with existing high blood pressure. Consuming omega-3 rich foods in the 4 to 6 hours after your walk takes advantage of the post-exercise window when your vascular tissue is most responsive to nutritional inputs. Think of it as giving your cardiovascular system building materials during the precise window when it is most ready to use them. If you are finding this helpful, please take a moment to hit that thumbs up button right now. It helps this video reach someone else walking every day and wondering why their blood pressure is not responding. It takes 1 second and it genuinely makes a difference. Now that we have covered what is missing from the hours around your walk, let us look at what needs to change about the walk itself. The adjustment is not dramatic. You do not need to start running or buy equipment. What you need is to reintroduce a cardiovascular challenge your body is no longer experiencing in a way that is sustainable and specific to blood pressure reduction. The research is very clear on exactly what type of modification produces the most meaningful blood pressure response in people who have already adapted to steady-state walking. The modification is interval walking, and it is one of the most studied exercise interventions for blood pressure in the past decade. Interval walking alternates between 2 to 3 minutes of brisk walking at around 70 to 80% of your maximum heart rate, and 2 to 3 minutes of slower recovery walking at roughly 40 to 50%. This alternation creates the repeated vasodilation and constriction stimulus that steady-state walking no longer provides once your body has adapted. A randomized controlled trial in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology found that interval walking produced significantly greater reductions in systolic blood pressure than continuous moderate intensity walking over 12 weeks, even though total walking time was identical between the two groups. The difference was the cardiovascular demand variation that blood vessels experience during each session. 3 to 4 interval walking sessions per week, combined with 1 to 2 steady-state walks, is the protocol most research supports. The timing of your walk relative to your blood pressure pattern matters more than most people realize. Blood pressure follows a circadian rhythm, rising sharply in the morning hours in a pattern called the morning surge, which is associated with a significant increase in cardiovascular event risk. A study in Chronobiology International found that afternoon walking, specifically between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, produced greater blood pressure reductions over 12 weeks compared to morning walking at matched intensity and duration. The proposed mechanism is that afternoon exercise works with the natural circadian decline in blood pressure rather than against the morning surge when the cardiovascular system is already under elevated sympathetic tone. If you are currently walking in the morning and not seeing results, shifting to an afternoon walk is one of the simplest changes with the most direct blood pressure evidence behind it. The third modification is breathing practice during your walks, and this is almost universally overlooked. Slow diaphragmatic breathing at around 5 to 6 breaths per minute activates the parasympathetic nervous system, increases heart rate variability, and produces direct blood pressure reductions through the baroreflex, the body's internal blood pressure sensing system. A randomized trial in hypertension found that slow-paced breathing practiced for 15 minutes daily reduced systolic blood pressure by a clinically significant amount over 8 weeks. Incorporating 3 to 5 minutes of deliberate slow breathing during the recovery phases of your interval walk delivers this benefit inside a session you are already doing. You are using the same time more intelligently, not adding more time or more complexity to your day. Before we wrap up, I want to come back to the nutrition guide in my Etsy shop because everything we covered earlier is just the starting point. The guide goes deeper on every heart-healthy food category, covering exact portions, the best times to eat relative to exercise, the food combinations that produce the strongest vascular response, and the foods most people managing blood pressure are eating that are quietly working against them. If you want a clear nutritional plan to pair with the walking protocol from today, the link is in the description. Here is the honest conversation that most exercise and blood pressure advice skips entirely. The plateau you are experiencing is not a sign that walking does not work. It is a sign that your body has gotten so good at walking that it no longer needs to adapt further. That is actually a measure of improved fitness. The problem is that blood pressure reduction requires ongoing cardiovascular adaptation, not just maintenance of existing fitness. The plateau is a signal that the stimulus needs to change, and the research on what produces the most significant blood pressure reductions in people who are already exercising regularly points clearly to the interventions we have covered throughout this video. A comprehensive review published in the journal Current Hypertension Reports analyzed more than 30 studies examining the relationship between exercise volume, intensity, and blood pressure outcomes. The review found that the blood pressure-lowering effect of aerobic exercise plateaued at moderate fitness levels in the majority of participants, and that breaking through the plateau required either intensity variation, the addition of resistance training, or addressing the non-exercise factors, particularly sleep quality, mineral status, and chronic stress load, that were actively suppressing the vascular response to exercise. The review also found that multi-component interventions, those combining dietary changes, exercise modification, and behavioral improvements simultaneously, produced blood pressure reductions 3 to 4 times greater than single-component approaches. This is exactly why adding more of the same walk consistently fails. You are applying one tool to a problem that requires several working together. Every piece we have covered today, the interval walking, the nutrition, the sleep, the mineral replacement, the breathing practice, represents one of those required tools. The research on what actually works for people in exactly your situation is remarkably consistent. A study in the Journal of the American Heart Association followed adults with treatment-resistant hypertension already performing regular moderate-intensity aerobic exercise. When those adults shifted to an interval-based protocol, added dietary nitrates, improved potassium intake, and addressed sleep quality simultaneously, the average systolic blood pressure reduction over 16 weeks was 14 millimeters of mercury. For context, a 10 millimeter reduction in systolic blood pressure is associated with a 17% reduction in stroke risk, according to data from the Framingham Heart Study. These participants were not starting from zero. They were already exercising. The improvements came entirely from modifying what they were doing and addressing what was missing around it. That is exactly the position you're in right now. Here is what I want you to take away. Walking every day is not the problem. It is a good foundation. But a foundation alone does not build a house. What you need alongside it is intensity variation through interval walking, nitrate-rich foods, potassium, and omega-3 fatty acids, better sleep quality, mineral replacement after exercise, and nervous system recovery through breathing practice. None of these require drastic change. Most require small specific adjustments to things you are already doing. The people who break through the blood pressure plateau are consistently the ones who stop doing more of the same thing and start doing the right combination of things. If this video helped you understand why your blood pressure is not responding to your daily walks and gave you a clear picture of what to change, Please share it with someone who is in the same frustrating position. So many people are walking faithfully every day and wondering why the number on the monitor is not moving, and they deserve to know that the answer is not more walking. Subscribe to Cardivive and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for trusting me with your precious time and your heart health. I will see you in the next video.